So, John, do you want to tell us about what you saw yesterday then?
Yeah, for sure. It's spring and early spring, but I'm looking out the window here and there are birds like white-throated sparrows that are in big numbers, and I just saw the first chimney swifts. But yesterday I was really pleased to get to see a Prothonotary warbler at this place called Perkins Woods, which is a little block of forest in North Evanston that floods every year. It's definitely got a minor spring there. And so I guess 3 days ago, one of the good local birders had found one up there, and it's hung around. And now they breed at Perkins at Skokie Lagoons.
Oh, cool.
Oh,
And
cool.
and but again, we were talking about wood ducks in one of the previous episodes, and just like wood ducks, they're a denizen of sort of riverine flooded forest, and
Oh,
so they can
okay.
be kind of hard to see. And yet in Perkins, you've got these trails going by all these little pools of water right now, and so this bird is just looking for insects along the edges of the big logs and stuff. And so you get this brown beginning to get greener vegetation that is what we have right now. And this bright yellow bird with a really elegant gray back is definitely sticks out, even though it's tiny. It's really fun.
So cool.
Yeah, that picture you sent, like the yellow was just so vibrant and
It's
like
Yeah.
electric. It was really cool.
Yeah.
Yep, and it's as Amanda noted in the text conversation we had, the a prothonotary is a religious uh, person in the Catholic Church.
Oh,
It's just so funny
And
that the bird is
it
named that.
picking the Pope.
yeah, because they wore
It was
yellow
also
robes.
found on a boat in Antarctica. Think about that. That little tiny yellow bird.
What?
So this is
What's that?
one of the craziest stories of the trip I made via the sailboat that went from the Falklands to the Antarctic Peninsula to South Georgia was that as we were leaving Stanley to go to the Antarctic Peninsula, there was another boat that was leaving at the same time, and didn't think much of it. And we went to the Antarctic Peninsula. We came back to South Georgia, and it turns out the boat was um, owned by a guy who's from one of the leading conservation families in the Falklands, and he sailed by himself to South Georgia and was doing work there. And we met him in one of the harbors in South Georgia, and he came on board for dinner, and he said to us, I was between the Falklands and South Georgia, and this yellow bird landed on the boat,
Oh,
and everybody just kind of said, God, what the heck could that be? But nobody had any, you know, there was no decision made. And he left. And then the next morning he stopped by our boat as he was getting ready to leave. And he came on board and he walked up to me. He shows me this picture on his phone. And it's a picture of a Prothonotary warbler
what the
that
What?
heck?
literally landed on his boat. So we actually made him, we talked, we didn't have to convince him, but we got him to get an eBird account and
Oh,
actually put that
awesome.
into eBird because it's
Oh,
such an
yeah.
amazing record.
That's
So
so cool.
yeah, the northern or the southern range of the wintering range of that bird is northern South America, the coast of Venezuela and that area. And that bird had somehow gotten all the way down there.
Wow.
That's insane. That's
That
so
is
crazy.
insane.
Yeah. And out
So
over a
cool.
lot of open water, too.
For
Yeah.
sure. And it flew
Yeah.
off.
And
So where did it found his boat, but then where did it go after that?
Wow.
Yeah.
into the
That's
water,
awesome.
probably. Not
Oh,
joking.
Shannon.
Oh,
I
what a
know. Here
downer,
I am.
Shannon.
That's
Jeez Louise.
But, but it's true. It's an evolutionary dead end, anyways. These vagrants usually are, right? Can't find
I
any
Not
of
know.
its
not not
kind,
not usually.
Mm.
Always.
unless it's some duck that can hybridize with some other duck. It's basically on its own. And it
Yeah.
Maybe
better
he
take
was
next
like,
time it should take friends with it because
yeah.
otherwise it's got uh, a lonely life. Although, that's what happens. That's how things get to places. That's why there are birds that breed in the Galapagos. Something got there, more than one of something.
Well, and it's interesting that you mentioned the Galapagos because when we got back from the trip and I was laughing that the best bird of the trip was something we didn't even see because this guy had it land on his boat and happened to take a picture of it. I was looking at things and a researcher that we know because he's married to another researcher that we went to graduate school with, had been on the Galapagos and published a little article about a Prothonotary warbler showing up on the Galapagos.
Oh, crazy. That's crazy.
Wow, so they're everywhere.
They're everywhere. and yet they're not because...
Right. That's
They're
wild.
definitely not the most common warbler in the world. By no means.
But what I love about it is it's not one you're going to misidentify when it lands on your boat in front of you, in the sense that, if you know what it is. And he didn't know what it was, but he's certainly got a nice photo of it.
That's awesome.
Well, do you think a Great Potoo, you would always know what it is?
Ooh, well...
I think you'd be scared out of your mind if you either saw or heard a Great Potoo and you didn't know that that thing existed.
But I my feeling is that's a bird that I don't think I've never seen it during the day. And
You probably have. You just didn't see it.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
This is one of the incredible things about that whole family is how they'll sit out in the open and they just make themselves look like branches.
It's got to be one of the best camouflaged organisms that's ever existed.
Wow.
I mean, if you see pictures of them, you almost have to see it breathing to know it's not a tree limb, a broken off tree limb or something like that. They are incredibly camouflaged during the day.
And so are they sleeping when they're doing that, or what are they? Because they have their head upright and it just
Yeah.
looks like part of the tree. It's crazy.
So
People talk about their feet being adapted. Do you know, because they have to hold on, right, for long periods of time. Do you know what the adaptation is to their feet that let them do that?
I think birds in general are just the way the tendons are structured is that they kind of lock
in place.
Yeah, and so it just automatically pulls back, and that allows them to hold on to things. Although you'd think that if the wind started blowing, they would absolutely get blown off sometimes.
That's a bird that when you take its feathers off looks 1/4 the size you think it's going to be because they're so fluffy.
Wow.
Right. So underneath all those feathers, it's not at all what it looks like. I mean, it looks like some prehistoric, bizarre thing that was made up in a lab. They're so bizarre looking.
And the feathers go right up to the edge of their beak, right? It's like almost their whole face is covered in, is their beak underneath that, or is it?
So
Their
yes,
beaks are tiny.
And the other thing about them is to see a prepared skull of a potoo. They're all mouth. In other words, that gape goes all the way back, and because they're catching insects on the wing that are pretty good sized. It's all about being able to get that mouth open. So they almost have no beak itself. It's mostly the gape and getting that mouth open that is the way they end up making a living.
And if you're going to fly around at night eating insects, first off, you better be in an insect-rich place. They are. But second off, you better have a big surface area to capture whatever it is you're going to do. That's why their mouths and their beaks are very similar to swallows and swifts in terms of being little tiny stubby things. And it's all about the width. Yeah, that bird
And
has lots of weird names too. People call it weird things. The creepiest bird, which I laughed at. But then it's also called the mother of the moon, which I kind of like that one.
That's Portuguese. So it's and it even sounds better in Portuguese. It's Mai de Lua.
Yeah.
Oh,
Very cool.
And then some people call it lost children searching for parents.
Oh yeah,
oh yeah, Amanda, you read some of that folklore stuff,
I
right? And I feel like touched on
did.
both of those. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, I loved all the folklore stories I read about the bird. And one of them was that it was husband and wife had, I think, a fight or a disagreement, and the husband started flying into the sky. His wife followed him, but she fell back to earth, and she became the Great Potoo, and he became the moon. And then,
Aw.
yeah,
Oh, that's
and
so
then
sad.
yeah, it's pretty sad. Yeah, and then the Great Potoo's call is just her calling him her husband, who's now the moon. So
Oh,
pretty sad.
Well,
Yeah.
I have to say it's one of the more. I mean, there are a lot of incredible vocalizations in birds, but it's right up there. And the first time I ever heard one, I actually thought I was listening to a jaguar for a while, and then we realized it was flying around, and that then it dawned on us what it actually was. It's
Jeez.
an incredibly loud call.
To
Have
me,
you got
it's
it,
like
RJ?
it wears its
yeah. Let
heart
me
on
see if I
its
can pull it up.
sleeve. To me, with
And
that cry.
why is it calling? What is it doing when it does that?
Really good question, because not much is known about the biology of these birds. In other words, there they are sitting on the tree looking like a stump for that part of the time, and then it gets dark and they fly around. But I don't think anybody's ever observed great potoos mating, for instance.
Oh, okay.
You know,
Okay.
how do you attract a female? Well,
They don't have songs, right? That's not a song, is it? That's just a
well, see,
call. Do they have songs?
no.
Well, this is a discussion that we not infrequently have too about the difference between a song and a call.
Oh.
So
here I can play it real quick.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
So just imagine you're out in this forest, which, these trees that are 30 meters tall, 40 meters tall.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So, John, you heard that live for real?
Yeah. Yep. And it was like, that's got to be a jaguar.
That's terrifying.
So John,
But-
what? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
I was just gonna ask, what were you doing when you were there? Were you there to study Great Potoo, or were you
So
there
we
looking
were.
for them specifically, or?
I was doing my dissertation field work, but the dissertation field work was included doing an all species inventory of Nolket Mercado National Park in northeastern Santa Cruz, Bolivia, and so we were trying to document all the species that we could in that area.
Oh, cool.
Cool.
And did you actually see them too then, or did you just
We
hear
did, and
Yeah.
and we actually collected one.
Oh,
And
wow.
Oh,
that becomes really interesting because in looking up what's known about Great Potoo, one of the things they talk about is there's been a little bit of population genetics work done with really primitive techniques, and the bird is found all the way through Central America and then all the way into basically through Amazonia. And the birds from Bolivia are genetically distinct from birds from Central America.
Huh.
And the problem is there just isn't very much genetic information on these birds. And so those are some of the only samples in the world, as far as I know. And so,
Oh, wow.
but
You
they
know, there
don't
might
look
be actually
different.
two
That's why
species.
it's so interesting, right? They don't look
Yeah.
they don't look different. So this they're a classic example of what could be called cryptic speciation, where there could be genetic diversity, substantial amounts of genetic diversity that underpins their distribution. But if you don't sample more broadly, you don't know what's going on.
And this family has 7 species in it, and Great Potoo is the biggest. They're about, I'd say they're probably about 1.5 to 2 feet long. They have they have a very long tail, and again, long wings. And as Shannon was saying, if you took all the feathers off, they'd be this big head with a mouth that basically covers most of the face, and then this kind of scraggly neck, and then long wings to be able to fly after the insects. But they're also very well known for these incredibly long tails that they have, that again are just used for flying in tight situations in a forest.
So we have 16 of them.
Oh, wow. So not very many.
In our collections.
No, this is not a common bird in collections.
Wow.
From
And I was going to say
1926 to 1986.
Oh, wow.
some of the other species are even more poorly known. So this has a big distribution. There's another bird called common potoo, which is also got a big wide range, which happens to have recently been split into a northern and southern species because they actually sound different in that case. The other thing about the great potoos in Central America is, as far as people can tell, they don't sound different from the ones in South America. But it may just be that whatever makes a great potoo sound like a great potoo, they don't change, and yet they've probably been evolving separately from one another for potentially several million years, is my guess. And so I won't be surprised that they're different. But again, it's one of these birds where almost nothing is known about them, other than the fact that they perch during the day and look like a stump, and the really good bird guides are actually training themselves to look at every stump they see in the forest because it might be a potoo.
Jeez. That's amazing.
They also have these gigantic eyes.
Yeah.
Which again are for seeing at night.
Yeah, they have
stuff.
a whole bunch of specialized things associated with flying at night. In their name, that's what nyctibius means, is night feeding, night life, in Greek. So, and grandis obviously means big, but yeah, so they sleep during the day and fly around at night, and they're very adapted both to their daylight, which is to look like a stump, and then they have all these interesting adaptations at night to help them capture light better in their eyes. So, it's pretty amazing. They also have, if you see pictures of them at night, you'll see they have a very strong eye shine, a lot of pictures on the web show that eye shine, and that's a specialized feature, membrane going across the eye, tapetum lucidum or lucidium, however you say it, and all of these things. It's an extra reflective surface so that you capture more of the photons of light in your eyes. That's why you have really big eyes. So if you're going to do things in the dark, you get really big eyes. And if you're always in the dark, eventually you lose your eyes. If you look at cave fish and cave salamanders and stuff like that, or some snakes, you basically start losing those things. But in this case, everything about their heads is about capturing food at night, whether that's changing the way you can get light or changing the width of your mouth so that you don't have to see quite as well to capture as much food as you need to. Including a friend of ours worked on this bird, Mario Kohnhoft, and so he has done some. Most of these kind of anecdotes come from Mario's work. Well, they've even caught small bats.
Wow.
While flying around, which
crazy.
Cracked me up. That must have been a shock.
Yeah.
For the potoo. Like, holy
and
crap,
for the bat.
what's that?
Yeah.
This thing has bones.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It's these groups. There's multiple groups of these nocturnal insectivores in this lineage. So there's the potoos. There's the caprimulgids, which are the things like common nighthawk and chuckwill's widow and whippoorwill. And then there's, in the old world, there are these things called frogmouths, and they're morphologically very similar to the potoos. And then there's this other absolutely crazy bird called oilbird, which I think we might have. Did we talk about oilbird at one
we
point?
did,
Really early on, right?
Yeah.
I think it was one of our first episodes.
Yeah, and so these families go back 20 to 30 million years. There are fossils in Europe, that are European fossils that people think are Potoo like.
So,
and yet today they're only found, Potoos and frogmouths are only found in tropical areas in the New World. And then Australasia, yeah.
So this group is really fascinating to me for lots of reasons, because first off, if we study this whole group, well, what we used to think was the whole group, there's lots of questions about the adaptations for living at night. Are all the ones that do that all each other's closest relatives? And you can hypothesize there was a single origin of this multiple traits. And if not, how many different origins of these traits have happened? And do they all do it the same way? Are their eyes all the same or not? Are their mouths formed the same? Are their skulls the same to enable the gape? All of these questions. But what really happened is that we know from the Tree of Life that hummingbirds and swifts are smack dab in the middle of this group. So you have this. Yeah. You have one order, Potiformes, inside of another order, which was called Caprimulgiformes. That's, the Tree of Life's really not supposed to work that way, where you have an whole order of birds, and that's one of the highest levels of the taxonomic hierarchy. Right before right under class Aves, for example, well, you're not supposed to have that. And so that was a crazy finding that was suggested by morphology and subsequently confirmed with DNA analyses, including DNA analysis to suggest that hummingbirds and swifts are closer to the frog mouse than owlet nightjars, than they are to than things that are in North America.
So this is closer or related more closely to like a hummingbird than it is to like an owl, or.
Oh yes.
That's crazy.
Yes, that is crazy.
It's absolutely.
Yeah.
And
so then it got even more interesting, right? The evolution of nocturnal behavior versus diurnal behavior. Hummingbirds are not flying around at night. And swifts are not night. They don't fly around at night per se, so they feed just at the transition between daylight and night. So how does this evolve? And the tree gives you insights into that. And there has been a fair bit of controversy, not just about that relationship, but about the relationship between oilbirds and potoos. Are they each other's closest relatives, which tells you something about, and those are the nocturnal ones, the most nocturnal ones.
But oilbirds are largely frugivores.
Yeah.
And so they're doing something completely different, and they overlap extensively in South America.
Echolocating, right? We talked about the echolocation.
Yeah, the echolocation.
Oilbirds. The whole thing, they live in caves. It's just weird. So some friends of ours and colleagues of ours again did a Tree of Life study in 2019, looking at how all of these things are related to each other, and their best hypothesis is that oilbirds and potoos are each other's closest relatives. So
wow.
Okay.
Now you have kind of a polarization of how to look at the adaptations for night behavior that you don't have if you don't have the tree. So it's pretty.
I mean, but those two birds are so different in how they do things. Yes, they go out at night and fly around, but in some ways that's where the similarities end. And it's just a lot of evolutionary time.
I'm trying to remember, does the oil bird have good eyesight or very poor eyesight?
It has good eyesight as well.
It does. Okay. It's the same.
But it's not, it needs to do things slightly differently because it's living in an even darker environment. There's no starlight there to help it navigate itself around, which is
okay.
Why
well, at some level it needs a little bit of both, right? Because it's going out and foraging at night, and so it's got to find fruiting trees and then find the fruit in the fruiting trees. But then it comes back to complete darkness in some of the caves that they nest in. But these potoos, I mean, the other thing that I find fascinating about them is they lay one egg at a time and they just lay it on a branch.
Yeah.
I was going to say, there's no nest, right?
There's completely...
Yeah.
But they incubate it for a super long period, more than a month. The incubation time is more than a month. That's a really long time. Think about that, to protect that. And they're not that small of a bird. So the egg is fairly substantial. To protect that egg from predation or from falling off the branch that you just laid it in this, you're putting all your reproductive effort into this thing you're just sticking on a tree limb. But
I just, from an evolutionary standpoint, I mean, it's incredible that they've been able to survive as long as they have with that little reproductive output. That chick, even once it hatches, has got to sit there and grow. It's not.
Yeah, and it doesn't get fed during the day. So that the chicks, that's how camouflagey they have to be to not get picked off while they're sleeping, is that they only feed the babies at night. So that chick, and you don't think of most chicks as being that still, right?
Right.
They're pretty rambunctious, just like toddlers. But that thing is sitting still so that it's not attracting a snake to come and eat it, or a hawk or an owl to pick it off, or a jay, frankly, or something like that to pick it off.
I almost wonder if what they've done is chosen to nest on these exposed areas in part because why would a snake invest in going out into those areas? If there are other parts of the tree that have more leaves in it. And so maybe that's how they avoid predation by these things. But it's, again, there's almost nothing known about, like, they don't know if there's male parental care, for instance. Because nobody knows. I mean, I think in common Potoo, both sexes feed.
I think that both sexes feed, but that might be just extrapolation from common Potoo, which is slightly better known than giant Potoo. So I don't know the kind of behavioral studies that might have been. I mean, they're not so easy to study. It's dark. They're up in the tree, and you're in the tropics, and it's dark. There's not that much light pollution where these things are.
Right.
So Shannon mentioned Mario Kohnhoff, this former office mate of ours at LSU, who spent his entire career down in Manaus, Brazil. And there was another species that was called white-winged Potoo that was literally known from one or two specimens collected in the 1800s, and nothing else was known about it. And he actually figured out the call of the bird. And it turns out it's actually pretty common across a big swath of Amazonia. But because nobody ran into it during the day, nobody had any idea. Like, they weren't even sure that they thought there might be that there's another species called Andean Potoo, and it was the specimens looked kind of like that. So people weren't even sure if it was a different species for a long time, but they just had way too little information. And then once you learn the call, you can start figuring out that they're pretty widespread and not that uncommon.
So Amanda, did you come across the chastity, some of the chastity mythology about this bird?
No, I'm so glad you brought that up. I saw that alluded to, but I never found. Can you tell us more?
This is, part of, I think, what in Mario's kind of broader discussions of the history of this bird. So in some parts of rural Brazil, they believed they had the power to ensure chastity. And so they hunted, they used the body parts to ward off some kind of seduction. And so, yeah, we can thank Mario for the fact that we know some of these
That's
things.
So
About
interesting.
this bird.
They should give some of that to a female duck.
There we go.
To protect yourself. Yeah. I can't even imagine how that would work. How you would. I mean, yeah. What are you guys imagining?
I don't
Just
know.
that a young woman
don't
puts
know.
a dead bird on herself, and that makes her less attractive.
Yeah, why are these things always associated with females? Why
Right.
why is the chastity belt on a female and not the equivalent stuff associated with males?
That's a great question. Yeah. Right on.
I don't know. I've been reading this biography of Alfred Russel Wallace, who spent a lot of time in Amazonia in the late 1840s, early 1850s, and Amazonia was colonized by these tribes, and as they were out in the forest, they would hear these things, and guessing you're sitting around and listening to this, and you start ending up trying to explain it in various ways,
yeah.
and that's how traditions get started.
Yeah. Telling
Or
stories
something
about
happens when you've just heard that bird at night, and again, the call of that bird is something you're going to recognize. It's going to get your attention when you hear it.
it. Yeah.
As
Yeah.
long as you know what it is, it'll get your
Well-
attention, but you won't have any idea what it is.
Right.
Scare the crap out of you.
Maybe it's a big turnoff. That's where it's associated with
The shrieking. You are just a loud whiner. Get away from me.
But again, we were talking earlier about, like, that's clearly evolved for the context of communication within that bird somehow, within that species. And I got nothing. And I don't know that any other types of vocalizations are actually known.
Has syrinx been looked at, John, in that bird?
Good question, because
The syrinx is the avian vocal organ,
Oh, okay.
outside of ornithologists. So these are the things that produce the sounds that birds make.
that's another, we're talking about these groups in this order now that includes hummingbirds, and hummingbirds end up having a lot of vocal complexity, but I don't think any of the other groups, none of the nocturnal ones do. The calls are kind of are basically just staccato insect songs or simple whistles, or and so I don't know. I mean, how do you maybe you don't need to convey much information if you're a great Potoo, I guess.
Well, they do sing up high. Well, sing. They make their noises up high in the trees, and so that is maybe that sound carries pretty well, shrieking
that's
from a
interesting.
mountaintop. They also I think all of the Potoos have slits in their eyelids. Did you read about this?
I did
Oh,
read
yeah.
about that.
Yeah, so they
Yeah.
can move the top and the bottom eyelid independently of each other, and they can rotate it So that's how some people think they see at night, and they do have big eyes, and light can come in through their eyelids, but they also can control these slits. They can move the upper and lower lids independently, including if they want to look at something, rotate them across their eyelids so the slit is pointing to where they actually want to see. I mean,
That's
evolution
so cool.
is mind-boggling. The things that can
Yeah.
evolve if you give life enough time, even though you're only working with 4 basic building blocks, right? So you think of the complexity of the English language, 26 letters. DNA is a 4-letter alphabet, and it produces all of life on Earth with those 4 letters. So
That's amazing.
amazing
Yeah.
what has happened.
Well, and I don't think we. I don't think we know 50% of what we probably should about Great Potoos from the perspective of how they're doing what they do. So that the thing I read about that slit was they were saying that it helped them. They could see during the day
With their
without
eyes
opening
closed.
their eyes with their eyes closed.
Well,
They
then-
must be
and I think that's-
blinded if they have to open their eyes during the day. That would
the
probably
sun.
not be so good.
Oh,
Yeah, actually that's for sure. I was thinking
that's
about it from the perspective of if you're gonna sit out in the open during the day like they do, you might want to have some setup where your brain is essentially asleep, but you've got this mechanism where some kind of information is still being passed to your brain when you need it.
wow.
Which again, like how does that
Maybe.
work?
And you also
Yeah.
don't want to
That'd be
open your
cool.
eyes because that's a movement that
No, I think
something
that's
Okay.
can see too.
like,
So
Yeah.
if you can just rotate the covering of the eye a little bit, and it enables you to see that there's a jaguar coming after you, which is not going to be true in the tree like that. But I don't know.
scare a jaguar off.
Yeah, it is rather
Shannon.
haunting. The sounds.
Yeah. I was gonna say, Shannon, I know you like Reddit, like I like Reddit.
do.
And I had looked up. I was looking for information on the folklore, and somebody had posted a picture of the Great Potoo in a Mesoamerican folklore thread, and some people had commented on the question of what's the folklore associated with this bird, and then other people just commented on the appearance of the bird, that because there was a picture, and someone, this was 4 years ago, said it looks like an attempt to create a bird done by extraterrestrials who have never actually been to Earth or seen a bird in person. Which is awesome. An
Well,
attempt to
awesome.
create a bird.
I can't say out loud the actual Reddit thread that was hilarious because it's called "Nature is Bleeping Lit," and the bleeping is not bleeping; it actually is the F word. And there's I didn't know this until I started looking up Great Potoo. I'd never seen this Reddit thread before, and it's hilarious. People describing this bird and what they think and what they see and how they would name it. It's absolutely hilarious. So now I need to go back there and see what other things they cover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just saying that. I'd love to see that for all our birds.
Yeah,
They probably
yeah.
have
Well,
some
I
good
never
ones.
thought of looking at that before, but now I will.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, I think we're getting close on time for this one. Is there anything else about the Great Potoo we want to say before we get into our mailbag question?
Every birder should want to see a Great Potoo.
Yeah.
But
And
they
hear
should
it.
expect to hear one.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
All right. So this is from Rebecca L. from Durham, North Carolina. And Rebecca says, "Hi guys, big fan of y'all's in Durham, North Carolina. Recently I discovered we have a robin nest right outside our living room window. I found it because I thought I heard baby birds. I looked and saw a female robin on a nest. It turns out the sound that I heard wasn't babies because they haven't hatched yet. It was the female robin squeaking. What was she doing? Also, I attached pictures of the eggs I snapped when she wasn't on the nest. I always love the color of robin's eggs."
Yes.
So that's from Rebecca from Durham, North Carolina.
That's awesome. Me too, Rebecca.
She actually was hearing the babies
Oh.
What?
because I believe that they were. I don't know when they actually came out. We should ask Rebecca that. But if once they start, those baby birds have an egg tooth, it's called, and it's something they use to peck open a hole in the egg when they're hatching, and they make noise before that they're actually hatched, and you can hear it now through the hole. So it's not impossible that she was not hearing the female making noises, but that she was actually hearing the babies. They just weren't completely out of the nest yet, so she didn't realize that they'd hatch. But
Oh,
so
that's-
we need to know, Rebecca, when the birds came out from when you heard them.
So my take on things was another thing that always fascinates me is it sounded like she didn't realize the nest was there. And it just shows you that even a bird like robin, which builds a nest that actually has mud and grass and things, it's a pretty big structure when it comes right down to it. Even though it can be right around you, you might not notice it. And it just highlights how the breeding season is just an incredible time of year. I mean, I go to places and they're nesting common grackles all over the place in the cemetery that I go to. And if you don't get good at finding common grackle nests, you won't see any. And so I just kind of love the fact that she had that nest there and didn't kind of realize it, even though it's.
So she took a picture of the eggs, and they're really blue, in which that sent me down one of my favorite titles of a paper, and actually one of my favorite papers came out in 2016 in the American Naturalist. And the title of the paper is Shedding Light on Bird Egg Color, Pigment as Parasol and the Dark Car Effect. Because we get asked all the time, why are robin's eggs blue? And I never had an answer to that. I'm like, I don't know. They put Billy Verdin on it, and it's a pigment. They put it on when they're laying the eggs, the females do. But there's actually a reason why it's blue. And now I even know more because it sent me down another rabbit hole of one of my favorite things. And again, why I love this podcast so much. So the question is, what's the best color for an egg? If you make it white, there's a lot of UV that can get in and damage the developing embryo. If you make it black, it becomes a hot car effect. It boils.
Oh, okay.
So how do you, what they showed in this paper is that blue was the perfect way to create a barrier to too much UV and not get the inside of the egg too hot that you couldn't develop.
Cool.
Thing.
Very
so that's
cool.
why I don't know how they came up with that title, but it's a great title. And now the other thing I learned is that the color of the eggs, like how blue you can make them if you're a female, is a signifier of how your quality as a mate. So males can go around and check the color, and the blueness or its interpretation of the blue can signify whether it wants to mate with that female.
So did
Or
somebody
not.
actually do a study where they made
They
eggs
did.
darker blue and actually?
They did. They colored the eggs. So they found nests. Which is not that hard for robins. They took the eggs out and put fake eggs in, and then right when they were hatching, they put the babies in of the eggs, and the male parent preferentially fed those that came from the bluer eggs, the darker.
Oh,
bluer
wow.
eggs. So they
Crazy.
male looked at the eggs that they put this range of blue colors in the nests, And the darker eggs were the chicks that came from the darker eggs are the ones that the male parent fed more. So that's signifying that blue color is a indicator of the quality of the female. So you can put
That's
better
crazy.
That is crazy.
biliverdin, I guess, if you're fitter.
Wow.
So
That is so crazy.
I know. See, nature is wild, or it's
Yeah.
effing wild.
It's lit.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, going back to Rebecca's question, if, let's say, she did hear or what she was hearing was the female squeaking while the eggs were still intact, would the female be communicating with the babies before they hatch, like humans are supposed to?
I think that's a possibility.
Better
I
shut
actually,
up. It's communicating that it's stable and still, and predator could come eat it. That's a dumb thing to do. Most birds on nests are
So
not
she wouldn't
making
do that.
noise.
so I was wondering whether, I mean, I feel like the alarm call of robins is a staccato thing.
Oh.
And
But
so
on a
if,
nest, there's no way.
I mean,
Who are you warning off if you're on a nest? Except you're saying, "Come here. Hey, I'm on a nest. I have either babies or eggs."
I don't know. I mean, if you get if something gets too close, you've got a choice, right? You could just leave your nest and be quiet, or you could actually try to, and maybe, but when you're doing that, you're actually notifying your mate to come in and attack whatever it is too.
And help out, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe if I'm drawing it away from me, I'm going to leave the nest and make noise so that whatever the predator they might be worried about doesn't know exactly where my reproductive output is. But I don't think of birds singing or making a lot of sounds on their nest.
Okay.
It's just not a
Well,
wise thing to do.
No, but there are, it's crazy as it may seem, there are birds like vireos that actually frequently sing on the nest.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Shannon. I have no idea why they do that.
When a female's on the nest, does she leave to get food, or does the mate bring her food? Like, let's talk robins, for example.
So we should do a episode on hornbills sometime, because they have a really fascinating, totally bizarre twist on that, where so in a lot of birds, both sexes will actually incubate
Oh, okay.
too, and so in that case, there'll be a switch off, and so if there's male parental care, that can be something that happens. But in others, where she'll just leave for a very short period of time and come back.
And what do the hornbills do?
So the hornbills actually seal up the female inside the nest while she's incubating, and the male feeds her through the hole.
Sounds pretty good.
And then what happens is, as the chicks hatch and get super big, she eventually breaks out. They reseal it, and then the male and the female continue to feed the chicks through the hole until they're ready to fledge.
Oh, that's hilarious.
That's cool.
Absolutely amazing.
Let's do
Again,
that
it's like-
one.
Just
Yeah.
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 Oh, and hornbills have all kinds of really interesting other characteristics too.
Oh, awesome. Yeah,
That's
let's for sure add that one to the list.
But they can't sound like a Great Potoo.
Okay.
Would they want to?
I mean, it's worked for the Great Potoo.
All right. Well, does anyone want
Yes.
to wrap it up on this one?
Whatever it takes. You do whatever it takes.
One thing I would say is just there are lots of nocturnal birds out there. And so one of the things that's a ton of fun is to go out at night and actually listen to some of those things. So eastern screech owls around here are really fun to hear when they're calling. And so, you think of all the birds you see during the day singing and stuff, but all these nocturnal vocalizations are really incredible to hear too.
Very cool.